Welcome to B2B Marketing Unlocked, the podcast that helps CEOs, business leaders, and marketing executives unlock brand growth. In each episode, I bring on industry experts to share their journeys, lessons learned, and the marketing secrets that drive results, while also sharing my own strategies along the way. I'm your host, Jony Mansilla, founder of Jony Studios, where we help businesses create profitable podcasts and content that drive growth. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Unlocked. Today we have Sham Sao. He's the CEO of Growth 11. Sham, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Happy to be here.
Yes. So you have a very unique perspective. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into marketing?
Sure. Yeah, it's a little bit of a non-traditional background. I actually started out, my first job was at McKinsey in management consulting. Before that, I actually went to law school, so it's even weirder than that. But it's actually been a
Oh, wow.
useful background for kind of, structured thinking and a lot of different things. It's actually been pretty valuable. But after working at McKinsey as a management consultant, I was working with high-tech companies mostly on growth strategy. And as a lot of consultants want to do, you want to get into an operational role. So um, as I looked at different roles, the B2B marketing one was the closest to what I was doing because I was already doing strategy. I was doing kind of looking at market segmentations, opportunities, things like that. And although it's not 100% overlap, there's definitely a tie to, B2B marketing there.
Nice. That's awesome. And what interested you in going towards the B2B marketing route versus you could have gone so many other ways
Yeah. I mean, I
with
think
your
for me, it
background?
was really looking at what roles um, can bring you into operational leadership roles. Where like I didn't want to just keep doing consulting work. I wanted to do something where I was running a business. And so when you leave consulting, a lot of times you're going into other jobs that are consulting type of jobs, right? And so
Mm.
this was a role where you're running, teams that are doing marketing, and then ideally from that it evolves into kind of running other parts of go to market, which is what happened with me.
Nice. And what would you say marketers misunderstand about the boardroom since you have a board background?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's not maybe so much a misunderstand, but I think it's, what do you really need to do to bring to the table for the board? Well, so from a marketing perspective, there's always the pressure on the immediate, right? That's with any role, especially, PE backed companies, even VC backed. With VC backed, it used to be sort of like kind of longer, runway, but these days, you're going from round to round. You need to have certain metrics that you're hitting. So, you got to have those metrics, monthly, even weekly metrics that are, driving revenue, driving pipeline. So that's kind of like the baseline, but there is a lot more to it than that. Beyond sort of showing the revenue metrics, you've got to show the right metrics that lead into it. So you can't show every little metric in
Mm.
marketing. There's tons of metrics, right? But what are the big ones, right? So you got revenue. If you back up one from that, you got what's the pipeline that's being created and how is that pipeline converting, right? Um, the other big things are boards definitely look to marketing to help support strategy, right? So obviously the CEO, the GM is, the overall owner, but the marketing leadership is looking at the market, right? You're looking at what's happening with segments, where are other companies going, competitive. So being the person that's in charge of those areas, the board definitely looks to that person to also understand beyond the numbers for today, which are critical. Hey, what's happening for later this year or next year? Do we need to adjust our position? Do we need to think about new markets, et cetera?
That's a really great insight because yeah, I would imagine if you show up to a board as a marketing leader and you're going through every tiny little gritty stat,
Mhm.
it can get a little overwhelming. They might not like that, right? So I guess narrowing it down to those top three big stats is really important and kind of doing your messaging all around that, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and this I think is true for all the executives in a board meeting,
Hmm.
um, there's stuff you want to share and show, right? And then there's stuff that you want to talk about, right? And so the best board meetings are where you really hone in on the things that you want to talk with the board about. And, a good board is one where you actually have discussions about things and they're really
Mm.
meaningful discussions. And it's not that you just go in and you show a number or a bunch of numbers and you're like, oh, yeah, we did what we were supposed to do. Check, move on, right? That's not how it's supposed to work. The best boards want to have a discussion about certain topics. And so I think one of the most important things is to think about in your deck, what is it that you just included, you just give to them so that they can see, and they might not even want to talk about it. There's a bunch of things that are green light going in the right direction. And then there's things that you want to talk about, right? What could those be? So obviously one of them could be something is not going in the right direction. You're going to want to talk about that. But it could also be things where something is changing, the market's changing, market dynamic. It could be a new launch. It could be a strategic initiative. These are the kinds of things where, or an investment, say marketing, or the company wants to make an investment in an area. These are things that are worthy of discussion. And it's really important to highlight, hey, here are the things that we actually want to talk about in the board meeting.
Nice. And besides showing too much, is there a biggest mistake you've noticed that marketers make with the board?
Well, I think I would say the big one is not clearly delineating those topics of discussion, right? So
Mm.
literally just having a bunch of slides and maybe they're well organized, maybe they're even concise, but it still may not be clear from there to say what are the actual discussion topics, right? So I think what I find works best is for each of those sections to have a section up front that says, key discussions, and even if there's decisions, right? So what do you want from the board? Are you informing them? Do you want to get their perspective, or do you want to make a decision on something? What are you looking to get out of that?
That's smart. And who would you say really owns growth in a company? Would you say it's all on marketing, or would you say there's like a mix? Tell me your perspective on that.
Yeah, ultimately, the CEO or the GM who owns the business is kind of the single, point that owns everything. But, that being said, it's everybody that's at that leadership team really that owns growth and different aspects of it,
Mm.
right? So marketing owns, getting the pipeline in there, getting people to know who the company is, also what they believe about the company. It's not just about the awareness, it's about the belief that you're creating. So, for example, if marketing goes out and, in certain markets, analyst reports can be valuable, right? Or say G2 reports. If marketing goes out and creates a bunch of um, material with your customers that shows that company X is a leader in a specific area, right? Well, not only that is that going to bring leads in, but when those leads come in, those leads are going to convert a lot better because you have third party proof and the sales team can use that proof, right? And use that as support. So those are, the kinds of things that can really drive owning the number. Even customer success, right, owns the number. They own the retention number and expansion number, right? And in these, many of these B2B businesses are recurring revenue. You're looking at the ARR needs to go up every year, year over year. Well, that ARR has different components to it, right? There's
Mm.
new coming in, there's retention, there's expansion. So when you look at those aspects, you've got marketing, sales, customer success, a number of different owners of different aspects of growth.
Yeah, that's a really good gold nugget. Proof is so important in B2B, I've found, right? Like if
Mhm.
you want to really show what you do, have the case studies, have like all the marketing assets to point towards the ideal customer you're trying to go for, right?
Mhm.
That's like a clear trust signal where you're like, oh, they've worked with a company like us. Let's work with them as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, your successful customers are going to be your best salespeople, right?
That's so true. And if you were hiring a CMO tomorrow, what would you look for in the first interview?
So, obviously, this depends on the company and what the company needs, but there are certain things that I think are critical across. So, today I think more than ever, being tech savvy and AI forward is critical, right?
Mm.
So, a few years ago, it was around metrics, dashboards, analytics, operations pieces, that kind of. So the tech part has been growing, but that continues to grow. So that's one piece of it. I think that's almost universal, right? It's like in any company, even if it's not a tech company, even if it's just a company that's selling B2B widgets, right? You've got to understand how to leverage AI, the marketing operations, the platforms, et cetera. Doesn't mean you have to do everything yourself. You just need to understand what these things can do, what they're capable of, and how to leverage them, right? Then apart from that, I think, as I mentioned, there's that strategic piece, right? So marketing
Mm,
has to bring that strategy piece. Where are we going? What's the positioning? What's unique? What markets? And then, where the rubber hits the road, you have to be able to, especially in B2B marketing, you have to be able to create pipeline working with your sales counterparts.
mm,
It's just absolute. And then depending on the kind of company, right? Product marketing might be important, competitive and analytics might be important. So this is where you have to sort of peel back and really understand what is really required for this company to go from A to B to C, right? And so um, we didn't talk too much about what Growth 11 does, but I started out doing more advisory and fractional work, and Growth 11 has actually evolved to now where, because it all comes from clients, right? Clients kept saying, "Hey, can you help us find the right person to do this? Can you help us
mm,
find the right person to do that?" Sometimes it was a fractional person, sometimes it was a full-time person, sometimes they didn't know, and we needed to have a conversation, say, "Hey, do you need somebody fractional for this initiative?" Some of them are clear cut, right? So if you're a really tiny company, likely, you may need a full-time salesperson still, right? Like either a
yeah.
person or a sales leader. But marketing, you might not need full-time, you might need fractional, right? Another good example is RevOps, right? RevOps, sometimes you can't afford to hire, if you're a small company, a full-time RevOps person. So a fractional might be good there. Other times you need to get a full-time person. So understanding some of those things is actually critical for companies to know, what talent do I need to get to the next level.
That's true. And at Growth 11, what would you say is your ideal customer profile?
Well, the companies that I work with, they're all B2B, right? And so, and that's from kind of early in my career, and that's where my knowledge has been. So I'm a big
Mm,
believer in, you need to understand your domain to really be able to add value, right? And
mhm,
so I really understand the B2B go to market domain. And so if you say, "Hey, go do work at this retail company," I'll say, "Hey, like, you should go get somebody who knows retail really well," right? Like they'll probably do a much better job at that one, right?
mhm,
So with me, it's been all B2B. There is a sort of a center point within that, which is SaaS, tech, AI, B2B enabled services. But what I've found is that um, there's a lot of commonality when companies are B2B, selling to other businesses, even if they're selling something different, even if they're not selling something that you might think is software or high tech, there's still so many commonalities in terms of how do you generate leads and pipeline, and how do you sell it, and sales processes and all these things, right? So
mm,
a huge amount of commonality across all of B2B. B2C is pretty different actually, but
yeah.
you know, within
How
B2B.
tell me about that different, like, how do you see B2B versus B2C? What are the differences to you?
Yeah, it's interesting that in some areas, especially in marketing in certain aspects, B2C can be much more advanced
Mm,
than B2B. I mean, B2B, B2C is kind of where marketing grew up, right? Like you think about the traditional marketing and advertising where it came from. So B2C plus in B2C, marketing is pretty much kind of making the sale, right? Like there's often no salespeople to
yeah.
go close something.
And it's to
So
the
marketing,
masses, right?
yeah, it's like you have to be effective enough for the
Yeah.
consumer to take it. Now that might be going to a store and buying something in retail. It might be buying something online, but like you have to be effective enough to actually get that person to take that action and complete and take out their money or their, e-wallet and make that happen, right? And so there's definitely a lot to learn from B2C. That being said, I think if you take somebody who's just only a B2C marketer and you put them in B2B, they're going to have a lot of challenges, right?
Mm,
Does it mean they won't be able to do it? I mean, smart people can figure it out, but it's a high risk, right?
mm.
It's
Longer sales cycles too.
Yeah, I mean,
more
that's the issue,
trust.
right? Like attribution is much more difficult.
Yeah.
You're reliant on the sales team to actually, go to that last mile. So there's so much stuff that's different in B2B. Mostly it's has to do with, as you said, the sales cycle length and then having other people involved in that sale as opposed to just driving someone somewhere to take an action. And that's where, I've seen people who come from B2C struggle at companies where I've come in as an advisor and somebody's just only been doing B2C and they're not able, sometimes they're not able to make the jump. Right. And so you have to say, hey, like we need to bring in somebody else for marketing because, this person is smart, but they just have too much of a gap. Right now, if you have a much bigger team, sometimes you can keep that person and you can bring in somebody else. And then that person becomes an asset because there are things that they know. Right.
Different
And
perspective, viewpoint.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a different perspective, different viewpoint. So, I think if you got the right mix or if you got certain areas, then a B2C person can, really be valuable. And then, I'll say this again, which is B2B marketers should definitely look to B2C to learn from. There's a lot of good stuff to learn there. You can't just copy it over there. Like, though, you have to like adapt it and see, okay, what's going to be different if I, apply this to B2B.
True. One thing I've noticed, and I'd be curious to get your perspective on, obviously, depending on the company size, there's some B2B service-based companies that the co-founders or the CEOs, they're the ones driving like a majority of the pipeline, and some of them don't even have in-house marketers or marketers at
Mhm.
all, and they might need that to go to the next level. But what are your thoughts on that? Now that we're talking about B2B versus B2C, like there are companies scaling just with the founders, but then what's hard with that is that then the company's restraint, right? Because if they disappear, the company disappears.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it even where they're running sales, right? They're running the sales team, they're doing all the sales. As you said, it all comes down to what's the scale that you're trying to drive to, right?
Mm,
So if they're looking to kind of stay where they are, it could work, right? Like maybe especially now with AI agents, things like that, you can have like a founder driven business depending on what the business is. But at certain, breakthrough points in revenue, if you're looking to grow, at some point you're going to need to bring in salespeople and you're going to need to make the process replicable. And it's not that easy, right? Because,
mm,
the founder has all this stuff in their head and they could just adapt on the fly. They know what to say. And now somebody else who's not the founder needs to come in and sell this. And they need much more sort of process and approach, right? On how do you do this, right? And so that needs to be extracted from the founder's head. And then if you have like a good sales leader come in, they can also help with that, right?
that's
And
true.
then the marketing one's the next piece, right? What I see more often on this kind of stuff, especially B2B, is that if they're doing marketing, it's like sort of like a one trick or two tricks, right? Where they're doing LinkedIn posting or like Google ads or found something that works, right? And then once you tap that out, it becomes kind of really difficult to figure out like where do the next sets of opportunities come from. And then that's where you need to bring in kind of real, professional marketing to figure that out and drive that to the next level.
That's true. I also heard it makes the business less valuable if you're ever planning to sell it, if the founder is doing all of that, because then if they're removed, again,
Yeah.
the company kind of slowly declines, right? So they need, if you have certain leaders where the leaders can be replaced, like marketing can be replaced with another great marketer and they have their processes down, that
Uh-huh.
business becomes a lot more valuable and more sellable, right?
Yeah. The other piece is, who's going to come with it. So if you sell the business and you have a team, yeah, you could replace the marketer, but usually the buyer is buying the business, the company, and at least some portion of the team, right?
Yeah.
So, whereas if it's a founder led business, the founder might stick around for a little while, but they're not going to stick around forever. And also, like when you have a bigger team, they're not going to leave all at once. This is actually also why a lot of times when companies buy businesses, they structure the payout to the teams so that they, vest over some time as well, right? So that they don't,
Mm.
they don't all get like a big payout and like walk out the door.
Yeah, that makes sense for longevity. Going back into the marketing role, what would you say separates a great marketer versus just an average one?
Mhm. I'd say the best marketers I've seen have like a real deep passion for it where they're just learning about it all the time, right? So,
Mm.
um, the people who are not as good marketers, I would say, they're the ones who just they'll come in, they do their stuff, and then they go home. And that's not to say that, you need every book you need to read is a marketing book and every podcast you need to listen to is a it's like
Yeah.
you don't have to make it everything that you do, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you only do it when you're at work, like that doesn't work either, right? So like the people I found, they have a passion for it. Maybe they listen to it on their car ride for when if they do commute in, when they do, or maybe when they go running, like maybe not every podcast, but mixing in some with some music or whatever, right? So it's really people who have that deep passion from learning and, want to learn from the best of what's out there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's one of those things too that I feel like marketing is changing so fast that if you just rely on what worked in the past and you're not constantly learning and kind of staying up to date with the current trends and what's working and what's not, it's really easy for you to kind of get complacent until it stops working, and
Mhm.
then and then that's not good, right? You need a
Yeah, and well, the other thing too is if you're doing testing and learning like any good marketer should, there's only so many tests that you could be doing at a time, right? If you have 10 peers or colleagues at other companies and they're also doing it and you're exchanging information with them, you're able to get 10 times the learning, right, that you would
Mhm.
get yourself. So I'm a big fan of just either whether it's communities or your own connections and you just, find ways to share information with them. I'm a big fan of being able to have other peers that you can learn from. And then, things like podcasts and books that they're also distillations of what people have learned, right?
Yeah, it was funny in a previous episode. The guest said that like he was an expert in demand and he found someone that was an expert in brand, and then they both kind of were like shooting ideas off each other and trying to like have friendly disagreements. But he said he learned so much from that that he wouldn't
Mhm.
have otherwise if he didn't find that kind of like mentorship opportunity where it's like dual mentorship, right? You're both adding value, you're both having different perspectives from your collective experience in your field, right?
100%. Yeah.
Right on. Let's say you had $1 million to invest in brand or pipeline. How would you do the split and why?
Well, I would um put it into programs that do both, right? Like maybe that's a little
Mm.
bit of a cheat saying that, but I'll give you examples because the reason I say is because I've seen um where people make this dichotomy and say, "Oh, I'm either going to do brand advertising or build pipeline," right? But what is brand, right? Brand is effectively getting people to know who you are as a company,
Mm.
and not only who you are, like that's not good enough, right? That's just an awareness, but they need to believe that you are the leader in something specific, right?
Yeah.
And then ideally that something specific is relevant to them and they care about it, right? So it's within that ideal target market, right? So within your market, you want those people to know who you are and why your company is the best at X, Y, and Z. That's what
Mm.
brand really is, right? It's not like I'm a big believer like brand is not just about billboards or like people knowing your company name. That's worthless, right? It's just like just knowing the name. Who cares that they just know the name? That
It's the
doesn't
meaning behind
it's the
what you
meaning,
give
right?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the meaning and even more the belief, right? Like the belief that
Mhm.
and this is the kind of thing that really moves the needle, right? So when you get that right, then there's really a hard dollar return on brand and you can measure the value of brand. And when you get it wrong, it just becomes an excuse for bad marketing spend, right? Like it's like, oh, that was brand, right? Well, you're saying that you can't measure and you didn't get anything from it, right? So that to me, that's just an excuse. But now if you come back to pipeline, there's a lot of ways, especially in B2B, that you can do both at the same time. So here's a good example. If you have a case study, right, and you use that as a giveaway in, say, um, a LinkedIn ad, right?
Mm.
That person, and the post has something about the customer too. So they see that, they click on that, they see the problem that you solved, and they see the customer's viewpoint of that. Now, isn't that doing what we talked about? Like, it's getting them to believe, not just you saying it, it's getting them to believe that, hey, this company can solve this problem well, right? And
Yeah.
so, and then ideally, some of those are turning into leads, right? Because you're giving it to the people that in your ICP. Some of them may have that problem today, and those would become leads. Some others will not have that problem today, but they might have some recognition of you, right? That, oh yeah, I remember this company. Now we have to be realistic, right? Just because they read one case study, they're not likely going to remember your company name or what you do. They're going to need to get much more engaged. But
Especially with the
maybe
noise now, right?
exactly right.
So much stuff.
But
Yeah.
maybe they get signed up for your newsletter and then they read it passionately. Maybe they get signed up for your podcast and they watch that passionately, or listen to it passionately, right? And now they really know who you are, right? And so to me, those kinds of investments in brand really make a difference, and they convert directly into money, because what happens is some of those people that turn into leads right now, those came in today, but those other ones, they're going to come in still when they have the pain and when they have the need. So, and that's real. And also they're going to be converting at a much higher rate because they already believe that your company can solve their problem and is one of the best companies for solving your problem, right? So, solving that problem. So when your salespeople talk to them, they're going to be already predisposed to believe that your company can solve this well for them.
That's so true. Like I remember I was working with a client, and it's so important having those touch points because a proposal was sent for a custom software project. Then they were on the newsletter, weekly emails, just value add. And 2 years later, they came back and signed the deal and moved forward. And when
Uh-huh.
sales was interviewing them, they said, "Oh, I found the newsletter interesting, and I always thought of this company's brand every time I saw it." And it's like maybe they would have gone with a completely different supplier because they wouldn't have even remembered. Like, who remembers 2 years from a call you had,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, it's so easy to forget. And to your point, I think brand makes pipeline a lot easier, so
Uh-huh.
it helps you, even if you're not doing everything perfect with the exact calls to actions. If you have that meaning and that belief and that trust from behind it, and you've seen the brand and it's recognizable, you can get away with a lot more in terms of your pipeline strategy, right?
Uh-huh.
Where
Yeah, and you
it's a
can
big thing.
you can get away with more, but also, like, if even when you have it finely tuned, your numbers will be much higher, right?
Mm.
The flow through will be much higher when you have that strong brand within that ICP, and not just awareness of the company, like true belief about that company solves the problem better than other companies. So for example, you're going to make the short list much more easily, right?
Mm.
Um, and you know when your sales reps are in there competing, they're going to have a much better playing field to play on than the other reps.
Yeah, that's so true. What would you say is the biggest leadership lesson you've learned?
I would say it's really about getting the right person in the right seat for all the seats, right? Like, especially like at the leadership team down. Um, if you get the wrong person in a seat, it can not only flatline, it could actually make the company go backwards. It could create tension between different teams. It could create friction with high performers. If they don't have the right leader, they might even leave. You might lose people. So I think that's really the most critical thing. And it's also like, it's not one size fits all, right? Like, you have to have a good understanding about what is it that this company needs based on the market it's in, what it's trying to achieve, and what does this person and this function need to be able to do.
Nice. Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes having one person that's really not a good fit can just make everything explode. Different levels of severity, but it's so
Yeah.
important having the right talent and making sure it's a right fit, not only with the skills, but I would say even for culture as well.
Mhm.
If you're not meshing into the culture, that can be toxic for the organization, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's got to be overall cultural fit. I mean, there's a lot of things that are common that people look for, right? Like these days, you're looking for people who are collaborative. For the most part, there are certain cultures that may be more top down, but I think for the most part, really top performers, they want to have some runway. They don't want somebody coming in there and dictating to them what to do. They want someone who's going to, say, hey, this is what your goals are. This is what you're looking to achieve. And then give them some creativity space, some runway to go, make that happen.
Yeah. I remember hearing a quote. I forget the exact quote, but it's almost like if you're the type of boss that it's just your way or the highway type of thing, and you hire someone new and tell them exactly what to do and they do it and it doesn't work, it's your fault, because you
Uh-huh.
need to have it should be like a dialogue as well.
Yeah. I mean, and if they're good, they're not going to stick around, right? Like you're going to
Mm,
attract the wrong kind of talent who just kind of, and like, how there's nobody who can know everything, right? So like
mhm.
how good can it ultimately be where everything that's being done is coming from a single person, right? It's like
Yeah.
you need to have like really smart people to, to help you with things that you're probably not thinking about.
Exactly. And that's what you should be hiring for too, is different perspectives based on their experience that you don't have, right?
Mhm.
To kind of help build the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's important. Like you want to hire people who can whatever area they're responsible for, they should know that like 10x better than you, right? Like if
Mhm.
they don't, you're hiring the wrong person.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what would you say marketers are getting wrong about AI?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of where it's still being used is just content creation, and I'm seeing people start to use it with agents. Um, but I would say there's two things. One is they're not using it to its full potential.
Mm,
The second is I think even when you do use it in some of these places, you still for right now need to have like really good training and really good data in because these systems only work as well as the data that you put in. But you
yes.
still typically need to have a human in the loop to look at what's coming out because there's still a lot of work that's being done on these systems. They're not producing perfect stuff. So I would say using it in a lot of additional places beyond content marketing, but then making sure that you have the right inputs and the right place that humans are in the loop to look at it and adapting, the process and the inputs as you see the outputs and adjust.
Yeah, 100%. It's literally the AI is only going to be as good as the context you give it.
Mhm.
Like we've seen that time and time again. If you have a blank slate and you're just prompting, I think that is a huge mistake, right? You need to kind of feed it all the information about your organization, about your clients, about your ICP, and even about competitors and seeing how
Uh-huh.
you can, make it better. I also think it's interesting. There's just so much more noise now, right? With AI, I'm noticing every blog post is being written with AI. So it's how can you get a better throughput with the AI? How can you make it sound a bit more like you, a bit more like your brand voice? How can it stick out from all the other marketing content that's being generated, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point as well, right? That you have to be careful to not let the quality become something that just looks like. I mean, you've seen the term too, AI generated slop, right? It's like what
Yeah.
people talk about is you still have to have even if you're going to have AI help you write it, it's got to have a unique, insightful point of view. It's got to have your piece to it, right? So I think that is important. You don't want to just put a lot of junk out there that's just AI produced. I think the other piece is really knowing we were talking about using agents and kind of giving it the right information. It's being able to cut the problems up in the right way and sequence them as well, right? So if you just dump a whole bunch of stuff into like say like a chat, for example, there's only so much it's going to be able to do, right? And
Hmm.
so being able to, especially if you're trying to process large amounts of data, it may make sense to actually cut up files into different pieces, have agents process parts of them and kind of synthesize output from them. And, you know, if you take massive amounts of data and just like kind of unorganized throw into AI, it might come up with something, but it's usually not going to be as good as if you can really parse it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what skills should marketers build over the next 5 years?
Well, I think it's the things we're talking about right now,
Hmm.
right? Is how do you really leverage these AI tools to do exceptional marketing, right? So, um, one of the things I'm seeing a lot right now is companies look at, hey, what do we do? Do we use AI to reduce our staff now? Or do we just use AI to make each person much more productive,
Oh,
right?
that's a hot topic. Yes, I want your
So,
perspective on that.
yeah. So, I mean, I see companies going both ways on it. There's certain areas um, where, if you can do it with less people, you'll do it with less people. So, for example, some of the back office functions, right? It's like, hey, if you do more finance, you're not going to drive more revenue, right? So,
Hmm.
you just, it's not like you add 5 finance people and you're like, we're the best at I mean, unless you're a financial institution
Yeah.
and you're doing, if you're doing like trading or whatever, yeah, like that's different. Like then finance is like your main front office strategy. But like if you're say like a B2B company that's selling and marketing software or tech or widgets or whatever, right? Like, like the back office functions are, you just need to make them efficient, right? Like doing more of them doesn't make you drive more revenue, but doing more sales and marketing can make you drive more revenue, right?
Hmm.
So I do see some companies initially like kind of tightening in the reins, but then what happens like when your competitor hires the same number of people that they were going to hire, and so they don't reduce, and each person is just like way more productive, right?
Mm.
So, and you're competing against them, right? So what are you going to do, right? So, um, I think that ultimately, like on some of these functions where the better you are drives more revenue, I think companies will likely continue to invest at similar levels or close to it, right? And
Mm.
maybe they cut back initially and try it out, but then when their competition starts to crush them, they're like, well, we need to actually do better, right? Because their competition has access to all the same AI. It's not like, it's not like, hey, I have Fable 5 and you're only using Haiku. It's like, no, everyone can use whatever
Yeah.
models, right? So,
It's leveling the playing field for sure.
yeah, like so, and then they're doing, and you could do more things with those, but they're doing it too, right? It's like
Hmm.
you can, engineer more agents and stuff, but if you think they're not doing it, then maybe your competition's bad, maybe, but I'm sure there'll be a better competitor that comes then. But if they're all doing the same thing, then it's kind of like the same as before. It's like, right, like you needed a certain number of salespeople, you need a certain number of marketing people to get stuff done. Um, I think on the developer side too, right? It's like um, you can get a lot fewer developers, right? Or you can have each developer do the work of 5 developers, right?
Hmm.
So if your competitor starts to move 5 times faster than you, well, you're probably going to need to hire some developers. If you like reduced your development staff, probably need to hire some people back and empower them with AI to be able to keep up with your competitor.
Yeah, for sure. The stakes are higher. I've been also noticing some CMOs. They're they're saying that's kind of one of their biggest challenges right now is managing those expectations as well, right? Because
Uh-huh.
yes, we have all these AI tools to leverage, but then someone could think, oh, you can make a blog post every hour then, right? But it's
Uh-huh.
also about having the right strategy and not just creating a bunch of content for content's sake, right? So
Uh-huh.
it's kind of balancing the throughput, but yeah, AI is changing how we do everything. So it's such an interesting age we're in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is what you need to be able to convey, right? Is to say, okay, what are we doing now, right? To get to the next level, right? Is as you said, like if you're posting a blog post every couple of days or every week, posting posting one every 5 minutes is not going to be a good idea, right? So what do you do with that horsepower?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, you could do some stuff around ads. You could do some stuff around outbound and the way you monetize. You could do stuff about analyzing leads that they come in or analyzing buying intent signals. So there's a lot of other things you could do. But that's where the trick is. Like, that's where people need to figure out is how do you use all this horsepower to be able to drive more pipeline and more revenue.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is the best career advice you could give?
I think for B2B marketers, I would say like two things. One is like get really close with sales.
Mm,
There's a lot you can learn, like listen to sales calls when you can. If your company, most companies record them now. You can see if you can get access to some of them and just say, hey, I want to like see some demos, hear what customers are saying. You can learn so much as a marketer when you hear, what that conversation in a sales call is sounds like and what's happening. So that's probably the first one. And then I think the other would be just the one we kind of referred to before, which is, learning as much as you can from others, right? Don't try to figure it out yourself. Usually what I found is, like if you're trying to solve a math problem, yeah, like you can figure it out and you have an answer, right? But in things like B2B marketing or sales, like it's not, it's not like, hey, I figured this out and I can see this is the answer. Like you don't really know until you try it, right? And so what ends up happening is if you think you're figuring out some stuff, you're kind of just guessing, right? And so, um, which can be fine, like especially if you're doing A/B testing and learning. But if you have other colleagues, peers, people at other companies, and you can absorb what they've tried and tested and learned, you're gonna be able to learn much faster, right? Than if you just try testing everything yourself.
yeah, for sure. Sham, let's end on that note. Very insightful episode, and I thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of B2B Marketing Unlocked. I hope you found valuable insights to help you grow your brand and scale with confidence. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Want to unlock the power of podcasting for your business? Visit JonyStudios.com. That's JONY Studios.com, where we help businesses create profitable podcasts and content that drive growth. Thanks for listening and see you in the next episode.